The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was sitting on my apartment floor surrounded by case files, legal pads scattered like fallen leaves, half a mug of cold coffee balanced on my knee. The notification lit up my phone screen. Subject line: Final communication. I should have known by the formality. My mother didn't do final anything. She did drama, she did manipulation, she did guilt trips that could circle the globe twice and still have enough momentum to knock you off your feet when you thought you were safe. But final? That was new. I opened it. Don't call or come over. We're done. I've made my decision, and it's permanent. You are no longer welcome in this family. Do not contact me, your father, or your brother again. 63 words. No explanation. No preamble. No sign-off. Just a digital door slammed so hard I could feel the reverb in my chest. I sat there for a long time, phone glowing in my hand like a piece of evidence I wasn't ready to bag and tag. The case files around me suddenly felt irrelevant. All these other people's problems, these strangers' betrayals that I'd been hired to untangle and document. What did any of it matter when my own life had just been amputated with a paragraph? I read it again, then again, looking for subtext, for clues, for anything that would make it make sense. We're done. 2 words that felt like a guillotine. I should have felt something sharp. Anger, maybe, or grief. Instead, there was just this odd numbness, like Novocaine spreading through my emotional architecture. I'd been preparing for this moment for years without realizing it. Every missed birthday, every dismissive comment, every time she'd chosen my brother David over me, every time she'd rewritten history to paint herself as the victim, and me as the ungrateful daughter who just didn't understand how hard she had it. This was just the official declaration of a war that had been quietly raging since I was 13. I typed back without thinking. Got it. Consider it your last wish. Hit send. Set the phone face down on the carpet. And that's when it really started. The thing about my mother is that she never learned the difference between silence and absence. She thought they were the same thing. She thought that if she stopped talking to someone, stopped acknowledging their existence, they would simply cease to matter. She wielded silence like a weapon, a punishment she'd perfected over decades of marriage and motherhood. What she didn't understand was that silence could be a gift. My phone started buzzing 20 minutes later. David, then Dad, then David again, then my Aunt Caroline, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, then David, then a number I didn't recognize, then David again, this time with a text. What did you say to Mum? I turned the phone off. The apartment felt different in the sudden quiet. Not peaceful exactly, but cleaner somehow. Like a room after you've finally thrown out the furniture you've been meaning to replace for years. There was space now. Room to think. I got up, stretched, felt my spine crack in 3 places. The coffee had left a ring on my knee where the mug had been pressed. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. All those lit windows like pixels in some massive, incomprehensible screen. Somewhere out there, in the house I'd grown up in, my mother was probably on the phone with David, crying, playing the victim, wondering how her daughter could be so cold. She'd always been good at that, the crying, the performance of pain. She could summon tears like some people summon Uber drivers, instantly, on demand, perfectly timed for maximum impact. I'd stopped crying around her when I was 16. Learned that tears were just ammunition she'd use later. You were so emotional, she'd tell relatives, shaking her head with practiced sadness. I couldn't get through to her. She just wouldn't listen. The truth was simpler. I'd listened too well. I'd listened when she told David his college fund would work itself out, while simultaneously telling me I needed to get a job to pay for my own education. I'd listened when she laughed with my father about my dramatic reaction to finding out they'd used my identity to open credit cards when I turned 18. I'd listened when she told everyone at Thanksgiving that I was being selfish for going to law school instead of staying home to help with Dad's business. I'd listened and I'd learned and I'd documented. Because that's what you do when you realize you're living with people who rewrite reality for sport. You become a historian of your own life. You save emails. You screenshot text messages. You record conversations in two-party consent states. You build an archive of truth because you know that memory is fluid, but data is forever. I'd been building my archive for 7 years, and now, apparently, it was time to publish. I turned my phone back on at 6 a.m. 37 missed calls, 43 text messages, 2 voicemails. I made coffee, real coffee this time, and sat down to read through the wreckage. David's messages were predictable. Shock, anger, demands for explanation. Mum is devastated. What is wrong with you? How can you be so cruel? She's your mother. The capital letters were a nice touch, very theatrical. David had always been good at the theatrical. Dad's messages were shorter, more confused than angry. Your mother is very upset. Please, call. We should talk about this. Translation. Your mother is making my life hell and I need you to fix it so I can have peace. Aunt Caroline's were the most interesting. I don't know what happened, but your mother called me crying at midnight. She says you've disowned the family. This seems extreme. Can we talk? The question marks were doing a lot of work there. 3 of them. Like she couldn't quite believe what she was being told. Like somewhere underneath the family loyalty, there was a tiny seed of doubt. Good. I deleted everything except Caroline's message. She was the only one who'd ever questioned my mother's version of the events, even if she'd never said it out loud. She was the one who'd noticed, years ago, at a family reunion, that I flinched every time my mother touched me. She'd cornered me later, asked if everything was okay at home. And I'd lied because I was 17 and didn't have the language yet to explain what it feels like to be gaslit by the person who's supposed to love you most. But she'd remembered. I could tell by the way she looked at me sometimes, like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't quite add up. I texted her back. Everything's fine. Mom decided we're done. I'm just respecting her wishes. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. That doesn't sound like everything's fine. I smiled despite myself. Caroline had been a journalist before she retired. She knew how to spot a story. It is now, I typed, for the first time in a long time. The dots appeared and stayed there for almost a minute. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No judgment. I set the phone down and stared at those words. No judgment. What a concept. What a foreign, almost alien idea that you could tell someone the truth about your family, and they wouldn't immediately leap to defend the people with the most institutional power. That you could say my mother is cruel, and not hear back, but she loves you, or she did her best, or family is family. Maybe I would talk to Caroline. Eventually, when I was ready. But first, I had work to do. The archive lived on an encrypted hard drive in my fire safe, backed up to a secure cloud server that required two-factor authentication and a password I changed every 90 days. Overkill? Maybe. But you don't become a forensic accountant without developing a healthy appreciation for documentation and redundancy. I'd started the archive almost by accident. It was 2018. I was in law school, and my mother had sent an email accusing me of stealing money from my grandmother's estate. It was completely fabricated. I'd never had access to my grandmother's accounts, and she died when I was 12. But my mother had sent it to 15 family members, including both of my grandparents on my father's side. I'd been horrified, humiliated, and then, in the white-hot rage that followed, I'd done something I'd never done before. I'd saved the email, printed it, put it in a folder. That folder became a filing cabinet. That filing cabinet became a system. That system became an archive. 7 years of emails, text messages, recorded phone calls, photographs of documents, financial statements, medical records, my own, with carefully highlighted sections showing injuries I'd explained away as clumsy to doctors, while my mother nodded sympathetically in the corner. School records showing the discrepancy between David's private school tuition and my public school enrollment amount, despite identical college savings accounts our grandparents had set up for both of us. Accounts my mother had managed. I had receipts, literal receipts. Credit card statements showing purchases made in my name before I was old enough to have a credit card. Student loan documents showing private loans taken out in my name for David's education. A police report from when I was 19 and called 911 during one of my mother's episodes. A report that was dismissed after she cried and told the officers I was troubled and making things up for attention. I had 7 years of being called crazy, documented in triplicate. And I had the one piece of evidence that would, if I chose to use it, burn my mother's entire carefully constructed reality to the ground. The estate records from my grandmother's will. My grandmother had been wealthy. Not rich, but comfortable. She'd made smart investments in the 70s and 80s, lived frugally, and died with an estate worth just over $3 million. According to family legend, she'd split everything evenly between her 2 children, my mother and Uncle James. $1.5 million each, according to the actual probate records I'd obtained through a very expensive records request and some creative use of my legal research credentials. My grandmother had left very specific instructions. $1 million to my mother, $1 million to Uncle James, and $500,000 in trust for her grandchildren, me and David, to be distributed when we turned 25. I'd turned 25 2 years ago. David had turned 25 3 years ago. Neither of us had seen a penny. I'd started digging after my 25th birthday came and went, with no mention of any inheritance. I'd called Uncle James casually, asking if he remembered anything about Grandma's will. He'd been vague, said something about how my mother had handled all of that since he was living overseas at the time. Said he'd received his share and assumed everything else had been taken care of. It hadn't been. The trust had been dissolved in 2010. The funds had been transferred to an account in my mother's name. She'd been the trustee. A position that came with a fiduciary duty to protect and distribute the assets according to the terms of the trust. She'd stolen it, legally, cleanly, with a forged document claiming that my grandmother had changed her mind and wanted my mother to have full discretion over the grandchildren's inheritance. I had copies of the original will. I had copies of the forged amendment. I had forensic analysis from a handwriting expert I'd paid out of pocket, confirming that my grandmother's signature on the amendment didn't match any of her other legal documents. I had enough evidence to file a lawsuit that would expose my mother as a thief and potentially land her in prison for fraud and elder abuse. And I'd been sitting on it for 2 years, trying to decide if destroying my family was worth getting justice for myself and David. My mother's email had just made that decision very easy. I spent Wednesday organizing, creating a timeline, cross-referencing documents, building the kind of case file I'd normally charge a client $15,000 to produce. This one was free. Call it a passion project. By Thursday morning, I had everything compiled into a single 247-page PDF document with a table of contents, an executive summary, and an appendix of supporting materials that could choke a horse. I'd included financial analysis showing exactly how my mother had spent our inheritance money. Home renovations, $180,000. A beach condo in her name only, $220,000. A new tour for David, $65,000. And various other expenses that certainly didn't benefit the supposed beneficiaries of the trust. I'd also included a separate section on the credit cards she'd opened in my name, complete with statements showing charges I'd never made, and correspondence with the credit bureaus where I'd spent 18 months trying to fix my credit score while my mother denied any knowledge of the accounts. The document was organized, thorough, and absolutely devastating. I titled it, "The Last Wish, a Full Accounting." Then I opened my email and started a new message. The recipient list took me almost an hour to compile. I wanted to be strategic about this, surgical. My mother thought she could dismiss me with an email. Fine. But she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd underestimated my capacity for thoroughness. I started with the immediate family, David and Dad. They needed to see this first. They'd been part of the story, whether they knew it or not. Then Aunt Caroline. She'd asked for the truth. She was going to get it. Then Uncle James. He deserved to know what his sister had done with their mother's estate. Then my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, who'd been singing my mother's praises for decades and painting me as the problem child. Then my father's parents, who were still alive and still sent me birthday cards with increasingly concerned notes asking why they never saw me at family gatherings anymore. Then my mother's best friend Linda, who'd been at every major family event for the past 30 years and probably knew where at least some of the bodies were buried. And finally, because I'm petty and because I'd earned it, I added my mother's book club, all 12 members. The same women she'd been performing her difficult daughter routine for since I was in high school. 23 recipients total. I wrote a brief cover email. Attached. Please find a complete accounting of my relationship with my mother and the circumstances that led to her recent decision to terminate contact with me. I'm sharing this because several of you have reached out asking for my side of the story. This document contains that story, supported by 7 years of documentation. I understand this may be difficult to read. I understand some of you may choose not to believe it. That's your right. But I want the truth on record. in my own words, with my own evidence, so that history, at least my history, is written by someone who was actually there. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not seeking reconciliation or revenge. I'm simply closing a chapter and making sure the final draft is accurate. Consider this my last communication about this matter. I won't be responding to questions, comments, or concerns. The document speaks for itself. Respectfully. I read it through 3 times, checking for tone, checking for clarity, checking for any hint of the rage that was humming underneath my apparent calm. It was perfect, polite, professional. The kind of email you'd send to a client or a colleague. Not the kind of email you'd send to family. Which was exactly the point. I attached the PDF, hovered my mouse over the send button. And then, because I've always had a flair for the dramatic, even though I pretend I don't, I set the email to send at exactly 11:47 p.m. Exactly 1 week after my mother's message had arrived. Symmetry, poetry, justice. I spent the next week in a strange kind of limbo. I went to work. I took meetings. I reviewed financial statements for actual clients who were paying me actual money to find actual fraud. I went to the gym. I meal prepped. I called my best friend Sarah and told her in careful neutral tones that I was dealing with some family stuff and would probably need to keep my phone off for a while. Like, off? She asked. Or like, Instagram off? Like witness protection program off? There was a long pause. Sarah had known me since college. She'd met my mother exactly twice and had somehow intuited, with that uncanny emotional intelligence some people just know, that something was very wrong in my family system. "You finally did it," she said. It wasn't a question. I finally did it. Good. You want me to come over? I can bring wine or ice cream or both or neither, whatever you need. I need to sit with this for a minute, but I love you. Love you too. And hey, I'm proud of you. I know that probably sounds weird, but I am. This took courage. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and let myself feel that. Pride. It was unfamiliar, like wearing someone else's coat. I'd spent so many years feeling ashamed of my family, of my inability to fix them, of my desperate need for their approval, even as I knew they'd never give it to me the way I wanted. But this felt different. This felt like drawing a line in the sand and saying, this far, no further. I'm done shrinking myself to fit in spaces that were never designed for me. The email sent at 11:47 p.m. on the following Tuesday. I was in bed, but I wasn't sleeping. I'd been staring at the ceiling for 2 hours, running through every possible outcome, every potential consequence. Would David ever speak to me again? Probably not. He'd been the golden child for too long. He'd bought into the story my mother had been telling about me for years. Seeing evidence that contradicted that story would mean confronting his own complicity, his own willingness to accept benefits that came at my expense. Most people aren't brave enough for that kind of reckoning. Would my father take my side? Doubtful. He'd spent 40 years choosing peace over truth. This would be too much, too messy. He'd retreat into his workshop, into his hobbies, into whatever mental space he occupied to avoid dealing with his wife's behavior. Would anyone believe me? Maybe. The documentation was thorough enough that even the most devoted family member would have trouble dismissing it entirely. But belief and action are different things. They might believe me and still choose her, because choosing her was easier, because she was louder, because family loyalty is a hell of a drug. My phone was off. I'd scheduled the email and then immediately powered down, like I was setting a timer on a bomb and then getting the hell out of the blast radius. I fell asleep sometime around 2 a.m. and dreamed about my grandmother. In the dream, she was sitting at her kitchen table, the one with the yellow formica top and the chrome legs, drinking tea from the blue floral china she only used for special occasions. She looked at me and smiled, really smiled, the way she used to when I was small and would come visit her after school. "You did the right thing," she said. I woke up with tears on my face and the strange certain knowledge that she was right. I turned my phone on Friday afternoon. 3 days of digital silence. 3 days of not knowing what bomb I'd detonated or who was caught in the fallout. The notifications came in waves. 50, 70, 100. They just kept loading, like my phone was trying to catch up with some catastrophic backlog of human emotion. I made coffee first. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and started reading. David, 23 messages, escalating in anger and incoherence. The early ones were confused. "What the fuck is this? This is insane, you've lost your mind." The later ones were just rage. "You're a liar, this is all bullshit, you're trying to destroy this family." The final one, sent at 4 a.m. on Wednesday, just said, "I never want to see you again." I deleted them without responding. There was nothing to say. The evidence spoke for itself. If he chose not to believe it, that was his decision. Dad. 5 messages. The first 4 were variations on, "We need to talk about this, and this is very serious, and your mother is extremely upset." The 5th one, sent Thursday evening, was different. "I've reviewed the documents. I don't know what to say. I need some time." That one I starred. Not because I thought it would lead anywhere, but because it was the first time I could remember my father acknowledging that I might, possibly, in some small way, have a point. "Aunt Caroline." 2 message, the first one, sent Wednesday morning. "Oh, honey." The second one sent Wednesday night. "I need you to know I believe you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I had to set the phone down for that one. Had to breathe through the sudden tightness in my chest. Someone believed me. Someone saw the evidence and didn't immediately leap to defend my mother, or make excuses, or suggest that maybe I was misremembering or exaggerating. Someone believed me. I picked up the phone and typed back, "Thank you. That means more than you know. Uncle James." One very long email, written with the kind of formal precision that suggested he'd drafted it multiple times before sending. He'd reviewed the estate documents. He'd contacted his own lawyer. He was, and I quote, "absolutely appalled by the breach of fiduciary duty and wanted to discuss potential legal remedies." He also apologized for not being more present, for not asking harder questions, for assuming his sister would honor their mother's wishes. I filed that one under interesting developments and made a mental note to call him next week. Aunt Patricia. 3 messages, each more hysterical than the last. I didn't bother reading past the first paragraph of the first one, which accused me of destroying a grieving mother and dragging family business into the public sphere. I blocked her number and moved on. My father's parents. A joint email from both of them, short and sweet. We're here if you need us. We love you. Always have, always will. I cried a little at that one. Then I called them, and we talked for an hour, and they told me stories about my mother that I'd never heard before. Stories that suggested her behavior wasn't new, wasn't unique to me, wasn't some reaction to my supposed failures as a daughter. She'd always been this way. I'd just been the most recent target. And then there were the book club ladies. Oh, the book club ladies. 4 of them sent messages offering support. 2 sent messages saying they'd always suspected something was off. One of them sent a message detailing her own experience with her narcissistic mother and thanking me for helping her feel less alone. 3 of them sent nothing. And 2 of them sent messages so venomous, so full of attacks on my character and my motives, that I actually laughed out loud. These were women who'd known me since I was 12, who'd watched me grow up, who'd smiled at me at parties and asked about my grades and my college plans and my career. And when confronted with 247 pages of evidence that my mother had been lying to them for years, they chose to attack me instead of questioning her. It was almost impressive. The real fallout came from my mother herself, though I didn't learn about it directly. She'd blocked my number, blocked my email, blocked every avenue of communication. But Sarah had a friend who had a cousin who was in the book club, and information travels fast in those networks. Apparently, my mother's first response had been denial. Pure, indignant, "How dare you, denial?" She'd sent a mass email to the same recipients I'd used, calling my document fabricated and the product of a disturbed mind. She'd accused me of forging documents, of manipulating evidence, of conducting a years-long campaign to destroy her reputation. Her email was 3 paragraphs long. No evidence, no documentation, just emotional appeals and wounded dignity. Then Uncle James had responded, quietly, calmly, with his own lawyer's letter attached. The letter outlined the estate fraud in clear, dispassionate legal language and noted that he would be pursuing civil action against his sister for his niece and nephew's share of their inheritance, plus damages and interest. That letter changed the calculation. Suddenly, this wasn't just family drama. This was legal exposure, financial liability, potential criminal charges. My mother's second email, sent 48 hours after the first, took a different tone. She was seeking family therapy to heal these wounds. She acknowledged that there might have been misunderstandings about the estate. She wanted to work together to move forward. It was a masterclass in non-apology apologies. Not a single admission of wrongdoing. Just vague words about healing and understanding and the importance of family unity. I heard about this email through Caroline, who called me and read it aloud over the phone, her voice dripping with disgust. "She's panicking," Caroline tittered. "She knows you have her. She knows if you push this legally, she's going to lose. But she can't actually apologize, because that would mean admitting she did something wrong. And people like her don't do that." People like her? Narcissists. Your mother is a textbook narcissist, sweetie. I should have said something years ago. I should have protected you better. You couldn't have protected me. She's my mother. That's not a shield. That's not a free pass to abuse your kid. The word hung there between us. Abuse. I'd never used it out loud before. It felt too dramatic, too extreme. Abuse was physical violence, wasn't it? Abuse was bruises and broken bones. But Caroline was right. Emotional abuse is abuse. Financial abuse is abuse. Gaslighting your child for years, stealing their inheritance, destroying their credit, isolating them from family members who might have helped. All of that is abuse. I'd just never let myself say it before. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Uncle James had hired a good lawyer, the kind of lawyer who specializes in estate litigation and elder abuse. The kind of lawyer who doesn't settle cheap. I got a call 3 weeks after sending the email. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Wu, with a voice like tempered steel, wanted to know if I'd be willing to provide testimony and documentation for a civil suit against my mother. I need to be clear about what this means, she said. If we proceed, this becomes public record. Your family's financial information will be discoverable. Your mother will likely hire her own attorney and fight this aggressively. It will be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally difficult. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my mother's email. We're done. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. Good. I'm going to send you a retainer agreement and a list of documents we'll need. I've reviewed what you provided to Mr. James, and it's extremely compelling. Your grandmother's original will is crystal clear. The amended version your mother produced is obviously fraudulent. We're looking at a very strong case for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and theft. Will she go to prison? Patricia paused. That's up to the district attorney. We're filing a civil suit, which is about recovering the money and damages. But if the evidence is as solid as it appears, the DA may choose to pursue criminal charges separately. I can't promise anything, but this is serious. Your mother could be looking at felony charges. I should have felt something at that. Guilt, maybe. Fear. Some residual loyalty to the woman who'd raised me. Instead, I felt relieved. Okay, I said. Let's do it. David called me a week later. I almost didn't answer. His name on my screen triggered something Pavlovian. A flinch. A tightening in my stomach. A preemptive defense mechanism activating before I even heard his voice. But I answered. What the fuck did you do? He said. No hello? No preamble. I provided documentation of Mom's fraud to Uncle James. He decided to pursue legal action. That's all I did. That's all? You sent a fucking manifesto to everyone we know. You aired our family's private business to strangers. You're trying to put Mom in prison. Mom put herself there when she stole $500,000 from her own children. I'm just making sure the truth is on record. Your truth. Your version of events. David, I sent you 247 pages of documentation. Bank statements, legal records, forensic analysis. What part of that is my version? Silence. Long enough that I thought he might have hung up. She said you faked those documents, he said finally. His voice was quieter now, uncertain. Did she provide any evidence that I faked them? Any alternative explanation for where Grandma's trust fund went? Any reason why I'd spent years compiling fake documents just to... What? Make her look bad? I have a career, David. I have a life. Why would I waste it on fabricating an elaborate revenge plot against my own mother? More silence. She's my mom, he said. I can't believe she'd do this. I know I couldn't either, for a long time. But the evidence doesn't care what we can or can't believe. It just is. You're really going through with this? The lawsuit? Uncle James is going through with it. I'm just providing testimony. You're destroying the family. No, David. Mom destroyed the family when she stole from us. I'm just making sure there are consequences for that. There's a difference. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there holding the phone, waiting to feel something. Sadness, regret, the ghost of sibling affection. But there was just exhaustion. The bone-deep tired that comes from explaining yourself to someone who's determined not to understand. I blocked his number and went to bed. The lawsuit was filed in October. It made a small splash in the local legal community. Estate litigation always does, especially when it involves fraud accusations. But it didn't make the news. Too small, too personal, not scandalous enough for public consumption. Which was fine. I wasn't doing this for publicity. I was doing it because my grandmother had wanted me and David to have something, and my mother had stolen it. And someone needed to stand up and say that wasn't okay. My mother hired a lawyer, as expected. An aggressive one, who immediately filed a motion to dismiss, claiming the statute of limitations had expired and that I had no standing to sue since I wasn't the estate executor. Patricia Wu demolished both arguments in her response brief. The statute of limitations for fraud in our state was 6 years from discovery, not from the date of the fraud. I'd only discovered the theft 2 years ago, well within the window. And while I wasn't the executor, I was a beneficiary, which gave me clear standing to challenge the trustee's actions. The judge agreed. The motion to dismiss was denied. Discovery began. Discovery is where the truth lives. It's where lawyers get to demand documents, take depositions, ask uncomfortable questions under oath. It's where people who've been lying have to either double down on the lies or admit the truth. My mother's lawyer produced the amended will, the one with my grandmother's allegedly new instructions. They also produced an affidavit from my mother claiming that my grandmother had verbally expressed her wishes to give my mother full control of the grandchildren's inheritance. That my grandmother had worried David and I weren't responsible enough to handle large sums of money. That she'd wanted my mother to guide our use of the funds. It was all bullshit. But it was well-crafted bullshit. Then Patricia took my mother's deposition. I wasn't there. Witnesses aren't allowed in deposition rooms until after they testify. But Patricia sent me the transcript afterward. 217 pages of my mother trying to explain away the unexplainable. She couldn't account for the timing of the amendment. Couldn't explain why my grandmother would have signed it just weeks before her death, when she was heavily medicated and barely conscious. Couldn't produce any witnesses who'd heard my grandmother express these alleged concerns about her grandchildren's financial responsibility. She also couldn't explain the handwriting analysis showing the signature was forged. Her lawyer objected strenuously to that line of questioning, but the objection only worked to preserve it for trial. It didn't stop Patricia from asking. By the end of the deposition, my mother's story had more holes than structural integrity. Patricia called me afterward, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "She's going to settle," Patricia said. "I'd bet my license on it. She can't take this to trial. The evidence is too strong and her own testimony was a disaster." When? Couple months, probably. Her lawyer will need to convince her. She'll resist at first. People like your mother don't like admitting defeat. But once she understands the alternative is a trial where all of this becomes public record and she potentially faces criminal charges, she'll fold. And what does settlement look like? Full repayment of the trust funds plus interest. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000 total. $250 for you, $250 for David, the rest in damages and legal fees. Plus a formal acknowledgement that she breached her fiduciary duty. $600,000. My inheritance, plus 7 years of interest, plus compensation for the damage she'd done to my credit and my relationship with the rest of the family. It felt like justice. It felt like vindication. It didn't feel like healing. But maybe that would come later. The settlement offer came in January. Patricia was right. My mother couldn't stomach the thought of a trial. Her lawyer had walked her through what would happen. Weeks of testimony, documents admitted into evidence, a public record of her fraud. The possibility of criminal charges. The guarantee that every family member, every friend, every person in her social circle would know exactly what she'd done. She offered full repayment. $300,000 to me, $300,000 to David, paid out over 5 years with interest. A formal letter acknowledging her breach of fiduciary duty, and a non-disparagement clause. Neither party could publicly discuss the terms of the settlement or the underlying facts. Patricia called to walk me through it. The non-disparagement clause is standard in these cases, but you should know it means you can't talk about this anymore. No social media posts, no telling the story to reporters, no writing a memoir about your terrible mother. You've already shared the documentation with your family, so that's done. But going forward, this gets sealed. What if she talks about it? What if she keeps telling people I'm a liar? Then she violates the agreement and owes you liquidated damages. Trust me, her lawyer has explained this to her very clearly. She won't risk it. I thought about the non-disparagement clause. Part of me hated it. It felt like being silenced again, like being told to keep family secrets. But another part of me recognized the value of closure. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd presented the evidence. I'd been believed by the people who mattered. Did I really need to keep telling this story forever? I'll take it, I said, on one condition. What's that? I want a full apology. In writing. Not an acknowledgement of mistakes or misunderstandings. An actual apology that uses the words "I'm sorry" and "I was wrong." Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's going to be a tough ask. People like your mother don't apologize. Then she can go to trial. Those are my terms. Patricia laughed. I love it. Let me see what I can do. It took another 6 weeks of negotiation. But my mother's lawyer finally sent the apology letter. It was 3 paragraphs long, written in the kind of stiff, formal language that suggested heavy attorney involvement. Dear daughter, I am writing to offer my sincere apology for my handling of your grandmother's estate and the trust that was established for you and your brother David. I recognize that I breached my fiduciary duty as trustee when I dissolved the trust and used the funds for purposes that were not in accordance with your grandmother's wishes. I am sorry for the financial harm this caused you, and for the damage to our relationship. I was wrong to use money that was intended for you and David. I was wrong to open credit accounts in your name without your knowledge or permission. I was wrong to deny these actions when you confronted me about them. I hope that this settlement and this apology can begin to repair the harm I've caused. I understand if you need time and space, and I respect your boundaries. Sincerely, Mom. I read it 3 times, looking for the catch, the hidden barb, the subtle way she'd managed to make herself the victim even in an apology. But it was clean, direct, an actual acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't an explanation or an excuse. But it was something. I signed the settlement agreement that afternoon. The first check arrived in February. $60,000. The first installment of my settlement, minus legal fees and Uncle James's recovery of his own share. Patricia had negotiated a front-loaded payment schedule, so the bulk of the money would come in the first 2 years rather than being stretched out over 5. I deposited the check and then sat in my car in the bank parking lot, staring at my phone. The account balance had jumped by 5 figures. Money that should have been mine 7 years ago. Money my grandmother had wanted me to have. Had carefully set aside. Had thought would give me a foundation to build a life on, better late than never. I paid off my student loans that same day. $53,000 gone in a single transaction. The loans that had hung over me like a low-grade fever for 10 years. The debt I'd been carrying that was at least partially David's. His degree, my name, my mother's fraud. Then I paid off the credit cards she'd opened in my name, the accounts I'd been disputing for years, the collections that had wrecked my credit score and nearly cost me my apartment lease and my car loan. By the end of the day, I was debt-free for the first time since I was 18. I called Sarah and told her. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "We're celebrating," she said. "I don't care if you're tired or traumatized or whatever. We're going out. We're getting drunk. We're toasting your victory over the forces of evil." She's not evil. She's just... She stole from her own kid. That's evil. Stop making excuses for her. You won. Let yourself feel good about that. So I did. We went out. We got drunk. Well, Sarah got drunk. I got pleasantly buzzed and ate my weight in fancy appetizers. We toasted my victory. We danced to bad music. We laughed until my face hurt. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Like I'd been carrying around a backpack full of rocks, and someone had finally told me I could set it down. David reached out in March. Not a call this time, an email. Subject line, I don't know what to say. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity got the better of me. I got my settlement check. I've been sitting here staring at it for 3 days. Uncle James explained what happened with the trust. He showed me the evidence. He walked me through the timeline. I don't know how to process this. I don't know how to reconcile the mum I thought I knew with the person who would do this. I keep trying to find explanations, ways to make it not be as bad as it seems. But the evidence is pretty clear. I owe you an apology. I should have believed you. I should have looked at the documents you sent instead of just dismissing them. I should have asked harder questions years ago when things didn't add up. I know this doesn't fix anything. I know I don't have the right to ask for forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what you've been trying to tell me. And I'm sorry. I'm also angry. At her. At Dad for enabling her. At myself for being so fucking blind. My whole life I've been the golden child. the one who got everything, and I never questioned why. Never thought about where the money was coming from, or why you were struggling when we supposedly had the same opportunities. That college fund that worked itself out, that was your money. Those graduation gifts, that car, that down payment on my condo, how much of that was supposed to be yours? How much did she steal from you to give to me? I don't know if you want to hear from me. I don't know if we can have a relationship after this, but I needed to say it. You were right. I'm sorry. And thank you for doing what I wasn't brave enough to do. David, I sat with that email for a long time, read it multiple times, tried to find the resentment or satisfaction I thought I'd feel at getting this acknowledgement. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad for the family we could have been if my mother had been different. Sad for the brother I'd lost somewhere in childhood, before the roles got assigned and the scripts got written. Sad for both of us, raised by a woman who saw love as a limited resource and pitted us against each other for scraps. I wrote back, David, thank you for this. It means a lot. I don't know what our relationship looks like going forward. I don't know if we can build something new, or if the damage is too deep. But I'm willing to try if you are. No expectations, no obligations. Just two people figuring out how to be siblings without the dysfunction we grew up with. For what it's worth. I don't blame you for the money. You were a kid. You didn't know. Mom made those choices, not you. You're not responsible for her theft any more than I'm responsible for stopping it sooner. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're getting some kind of help processing this, because it's a lot. Take care, he wrote back the next day. Just one line. Coffee sometime? I said yes. While we met at a cafe halfway between our apartments. Neutral territory. I got there early, ordered a latte, sat at a corner table where I could see the door. David walked in 10 minutes late, classic, but he looked different, older, tired. Like someone who'd been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths and hadn't slept much in the process. He saw me and attempted a smile. It didn't quite work. Hey, he said. Hey. We sat in awkward silence for a minute. Two people who shared DNA, and a childhood, and a mother who'd damaged them both in different ways, trying to figure out if there was anything left to say to each other. I don't know how to do this, he said finally. I don't know how to be your brother without all the stuff, all the history. Me neither. But maybe we start by just being honest. No more pretending. No more protecting her. Dad moved out, he said suddenly. Did you know that? I didn't. When? Last month? He said he couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't live with her knowing what she'd done. He got a studio apartment downtown. He's been calling me a lot. I think he's lonely. Are you talking to him? Yeah. It's weird. He's different without her around. Calmer. More honest. He actually apologized to me last week for not protecting us better. Said he knew things were wrong, but didn't know how to fix them, so he just checked out. Worked long hours. Avoided conflict. Classic dad. But at least he was acknowledging it. Are you talking to her? I asked. No, I can't. Every time I think about calling her, I just get angry. She calls me every day, leaves voicemails, long ones, crying, begging me to understand. I haven't listened to them, I moaned. You don't have to. I know, but it feels wrong. She's my mother. She's also a thief who stole from you for years. Those things can both be true. He laughed, hollow. That's what my therapist says. You're seeing a therapist? Yeah. Started a few weeks ago. Figured I needed professional help processing the fact that my entire childhood was built on lies and stolen money. He paused. You should be proud of yourself, you know, for doing this, for standing up to her. I couldn't have done it. You could have. You just didn't have to. She wasn't targeting you. That's not an excuse. No. But it's context. We talked for 2 hours. About our childhoods. About the different realities we'd lived in the same house. About the ways my mother had played us against each other. Had praised him while criticizing me. Had given him opportunities while limiting mine. About the credit card fraud, the student loans, the smaller betrayals that had accumulated like sediment over years. It wasn't easy. There were moments where I could see him wanting to defend her, old instincts dying hard. But he caught himself, stopped, acknowledged what was real instead of what he wanted to be real. When we finally left, he hugged me, quick and awkward, but genuine. I want to try, he said. If you're willing, I want to see if we can have a real relationship, without her in the middle of it. Yeah, I said. I'd like that too. Spring came. The snow melted. The city turned green again. That impossible optimistic green that makes you forget how grey winter was. I took a vacation. My first real vacation in years. Flew to Portugal. Spent 2 weeks wandering through Lisbon and Porto, eating pastéis de nata and drinking wine and not checking my phone. Sarah came with me, and we stayed in small apartments and got lost on purpose and talked about everything except my family. It was perfect. When I got back, there was a letter waiting in my mailbox. Handwritten. My mother's handwriting. I almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity won again. Dear daughter, I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that I think about you every day. I wonder how you're doing, what you're doing, if you're happy. I've been in therapy. My therapist says I need to take accountability for my actions without expecting anything in return. So here it is. I hurt you. Deliberately, repeatedly, in ways that I'm only starting to understand were abusive. I stole from you. I gaslit you. I prioritized your brother over you in ways that weren't fair or loving. I told myself I was doing what was best for the family. I told myself you were difficult, that you were the problem. But the truth is that I was the problem. I was insecure and controlling and afraid of losing power. So I took it out on you. I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me. I don't know if I'd forgive me in your position. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. You deserve Mom, I read the letter 3 times. Looking for manipulation, for guilt trips, for the subtle knife I'd learned to expect from her. But it was clean, honest, the kind of apology I'd wanted my whole life and never thought I'd get. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Maybe I would someday, when enough time had passed. when the wounds had scarred over enough to touch without flinching. But for now, the silence was enough. The silence was mine, and that felt like power. 2 years later, I'm sitting in my new apartment, a place I bought with my settlement money, my inheritance, the money that was always supposed to be mine. It's small, but it's mine. High ceilings, good light, a view of the park. David comes over for dinner once a month. We're still figuring out how to be siblings, but we're trying. Last month, he brought his girlfriend, a sharp, funny woman who doesn't take his shit and calls him out when he's being avoidant. I like her. Dad and I talk every few weeks. He got divorced last year. Said it took him 40 years to realize he'd been living someone else's life. He seems lighter now, happier. He started dating someone, a woman who runs a bookstore and laughs at his terrible jokes. He asked if I'd like to meet her. I said yes. Aunt Caroline and I have lunch quarterly. She's become something like the mother figure I needed. The adult who looks at me and sees me rather than some reflection of their own anxieties and ambitions. Uncle James and I text occasionally. Mostly case law and professional gossip. We're both in adjacent fields. But there's affection there. Respect. The kind of relationship that's built on truth rather than obligation. I haven't spoken to my mother since the settlement. I blocked her number after the letter. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I needed space. I needed silence. I needed to build a life that wasn't defined by her presence or her absence. Sarah says I should be proud of what I did. You went to war, she told me last week over drinks. You went to war with your own mother and you won. But it doesn't feel like war. It feels like archaeology, like I spent years carefully excavating my own history, brushing away the lies and distortions and false narratives until I found the truth underneath. And then I held up that truth to the light and said, this is what really happened. This is what she really did. The evidence speaks for itself. There's a postscript to this story, though I didn't learn about it until recently. My mother's book club disbanded. Apparently, after the emails and the settlement and the quiet implosion of her carefully curated image, the social circle couldn't hold. Some of the women believed me and distanced themselves from her. Some believed her and resented being dragged into family drama. Some just got tired of the whole mess and found other book clubs. Linda, my mother's best friend for 30 years, stopped returning her calls. I don't know the full story there, but Caroline heard through the grapevine that Linda had her own ugly history with her mother, a history my mother had dismissed and minimized for years. Seeing my documentation had triggered something in Linda, made her question why she'd stayed loyal to someone who couldn't validate other people's pain. My mother sold the beach condo last year. I don't know if it was financial pressure from the settlement or just the weight of knowing how she'd paid for it. But it's gone. She's still living in the family house. My father let her keep it in the divorce, said he didn't want it anymore, didn't want the memories. She works part-time at a non-profit now, goes to therapy twice a week. I heard she volunteers at a women's shelter. Maybe she's changing. Maybe the consequences finally broke through the defenses. Maybe losing her husband, her son's trust, her daughter entirely. And most of her social circle was enough to make her look at herself honestly for the first time. Or maybe she's just performing again, playing the role of the reformed villain, the repentant mother. waiting for everyone to tell her she's done enough penance and can go back to being the victim now. I don't know. And I've realized slowly that I don't need to know. Her story isn't my story anymore. Her redemption or lack thereof isn't my responsibility. I saved myself. I told the truth. I documented the evidence and let it speak. And then I walked away. I still have the archive. The encrypted hard drive in my fire safe, the backup in the cloud. 7 years of documentation, 247 pages of evidence, proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't lying, wasn't the problem. I don't look at it much anymore. Don't need to. It did its job. It gave me the language to explain my own history, the evidence to contradict the lies, the ammunition to fight back when fighting back was necessary. But now, it's just history. A record of something that happened to someone I used to be. I'm different now. Lighter. Freer. Still angry sometimes. That doesn't just evaporate. But the anger is cleaner now. It's not tangled up with guilt or confusion or the desperate hope that maybe this time she'll finally see me. She saw me. I made sure of it. I sent her 247 pages of proof that I existed, that I mattered, that her actions had consequences. And when she dismissed me with an email, "Don't call or come over, we're done," I took her at her word. I considered it her last wish. And I gave her exactly what she asked for. My absence. My silence. My complete and total withdrawal from her life. It turns out that's the most powerful gift you can give someone who needs you to exist in order to have someone to blame for their own unhappiness. You can just stop existing for them. You can take the story they wrote about you, difficult daughter, ungrateful child, family destroyer, and you can say, "No, that's not my story. Here's my story. Here's the evidence. Here's the truth." And then you can walk away. Last week, I got a message from my grandmother in a dream. It was the second one since I sent that email 3 years ago. She was in her kitchen again. Same yellow table, same blue china. "Are you happy?" she asked. And I realized, sitting there in my dream at her table, that I was. Not perfectly happy. Not healed in some complete fictional way, but happy in the messy, complicated way that real people get to be happy when they stop performing for people who will never applaud. "Yeah," I told her. "I think I am." She smiled and pushed a cup of tea across the table. "Good. That's what the money was for, you know. Not the money itself. The freedom it was supposed to give you. The foundation." "I know. I'm proud of you for fighting for it. For fighting for yourself." I woke up with that phrase echoing in my head. For fighting for yourself. Because that's what it was in the end. Not revenge, not destruction, not some elaborate punishment scheme. Just fighting for myself. For my truth. For my right to tell my own story without someone else writing over it in red ink. My mother wanted me gone. She wanted me silenced. She wanted me to disappear so she could control the narrative, could tell everyone that I was the problem, could live in her version of reality where she was the victim and I was the villain. So I gave her what she asked for, my absence. But first, I gave the truth to everyone who'd ever believed her lies. I gave them 247 pages of evidence. I gave them a full accounting. I gave them the receipts. And then, when the evidence had done its work, when the truth was on record and undeniable, I shut her up forever. Not with more words, not with more arguments, not with more attempts to make her see me. With silence, my silence, on my terms, because I chose it. And that, it turns out, is the quietest, most powerful revenge there is. If you've ever been told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult, if you've ever been gaslit by someone who's supposed to love you, I want you to know this. Document everything. Tell your truth. And when they try to silence you, remember, your silence is yours to give or withhold, not theirs to take. The evidence speaks for itself. You just have to be brave enough to let it.